From the outside, my life looked like something out of a magazine. A six-figure salary, a house in the suburbs with a lawn so green it looked painted, a wife who still held my hand in public after 20 years. People called me lucky, stable, the kind of man who had it all figured out. I woke up at 5:30 every morning, same as always. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirp of early birds. I'd make coffee, black, no sugar, and stand at the kitchen window watching the sky lighten. The neighborhood was peaceful, perfect, the kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. My wife, Carol, still slept upstairs. She'd wake later, moving through the house like a ghost, careful not to disturb me as I got ready for work. We didn't talk much in the mornings anymore, not like we used to. There was a time when she'd lean against the counter, still in her robe, and tell me about her dreams or what she planned to make for dinner. Now, we just exchanged quiet nods, the kind two strangers might give each other in an elevator. The drive to the office was the same too. 45 minutes of NPR and stoplights. I knew every turn, every pothole, every billboard along the way. My job was comfortable, a vice president title, a corner office with a view of the city. My colleagues respected me, some even envied me. But no one really knew me, not the way Carol once had. I'd eat lunch at my desk, scrolling through emails, telling myself I was too busy to take a real break. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the darkened computer screen, a man in his 50s with thinning hair and tired eyes. When did I start looking so old? When did my life become this routine? At home, the evenings blurred together, dinner in front of the TV, a few stiff drinks to take the edge off. Carol would ask about my day, and I'd give her the same vague answers. Fine. Busy. Nothing special. She stopped pressing for details years ago. The cracks were small, easy to ignore. A hollow feeling in my chest when I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The way I'd sometimes sit in my car in the driveway for 10, 15 minutes, just delaying. Not because I didn't want to go inside, but because I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel when I did. Then, one night, as I poured myself another drink, Carol looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "Do you remember when we used to talk?" It wasn't an accusation, just a quiet observation, soft as a sigh, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't answer, just took a slow sip, the ice clinking in the glass. That was the moment I realized I had everything I was supposed to want, and none of what I actually needed. I told myself I'd fix things. That's what I did. I solved problems. But the next morning, I still left for work before Carol woke up. The house was quiet, the way I liked it, the way I'd made it. The office was my refuge. The hum of the computer, the neat stacks of paperwork, the predictable rhythm of meetings. It was all under my control. At my desk, I kept a single framed photo of Carol and me from our honeymoon, back when her laugh came easily and my hands weren't always clenched. I hadn't looked at it in years. That morning I did. Her smile was wide, unguarded. Mine was too, though it looked foreign now, like it belonged to someone else. When had I stopped smiling like that? When had I become this careful, measured version of myself? The man in the photo didn't know yet how much he'd sacrificed for success. The late nights, the missed birthdays, the slow erosion of something he didn't realize was fragile until it was gone. At lunch, I drove to a diner instead of eating at my desk, a small rebellion. The place was half empty, the vinyl booth sticky under my palms. The waitress, older, tired-eyed, poured my coffee without asking and called me Hun. It felt oddly comforting. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over Carol's number. What would I even say? I'm sorry? For what? For working hard? For providing? That wasn't the problem, and we both knew it. The problem was the silence. The way I'd stopped seeing her, really seeing her years ago. The way she'd stopped expecting me to. When I got home, the garage light was burned out again. I fumbled in the dark, my keys jangling too loud. Inside, Carol was reading on the couch, her glasses perched on the tip of her nose. She glanced up, nodded, then went back to her book. I stood there, waiting for, what? A greeting, a sign? But nothing came, just the quiet turning of a page. Upstairs, I changed out of my suit, the fabric stiff with starch. In the closet, my clothes hung neatly beside hers, close, but never touching. Then I saw it. A shoebox on the top shelf, half hidden behind a winter coat. I knew what was inside before I opened it. Ticket stubs, postcards, a dried corsage from some long ago wedding, the brittle remains of a life we'd once shared. I didn't take it down, just stared, my throat tight. That night, I lay awake, listening to Carol's steady breathing beside me. The room was dark, but I could still see the outline of the shoebox in my mind. Why had she kept those things? Nostalgia? Regret? Or just proof that what we'd lost had once been real? I turned my face into the pillow, the weight of it all pressing down. I'd spent my life climbing toward money, toward security, toward some indistinct finish line I'd never reach. But what if I'd been wrong? What if the thing I'd been reaching for wasn't ahead of me at all? What if it was already behind me and I just let it go? I started noticing the little things after that. The way Carol would pause before answering when I asked about her day, as if deciding whether I really wanted to know. The careful distance she kept when we passed each other in the hallway, like we were both afraid of brushing shoulders. Our marriage had become a series of polite avoidances, two people orbiting the same space but never quite touching. One Sunday morning, I found her in the garden. She was kneeling in the dirt, planting something with the same quiet focus she used to give our daughter's scraped knees when she was little. I stood at the kitchen window, coffee cooling in my hands, watching her work. The sunlight caught the gray in her hair. When had that happened? And for a moment she looked so much like the woman I'd married that my chest ached. I almost went outside. Almost. But then I pictured myself standing there, useless, with nothing to say. So I turned away. Later, while Carol was at the store, I wandered into the guest room, the one we'd once planned to turn into a nursery before the miscarriages, before we stopped talking about it. Now it was just a place for storage. A box of our daughter's old school projects sat in the corner, gathering dust. I lifted the lid. Report cards, finger paintings, a lopsided clay ashtray she'd made me in second grade. At the bottom, a Father's Day card with a crayon heart on the front. Inside, in her careful childhood handwriting, "You're the best dad ever." I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, the card trembling in my hands. Had I ever been? I'd missed dance recitals, parent-teacher conferences, bedtime stories, always for work, always with the promise that it would be worth it. But what exactly had it been worth? That night, I dreamed of Carol. We were young again, driving somewhere with the windows down, her hand resting lightly on my thigh. I woke with a start, the room too quiet, the space beside me empty. Downstairs, I found her asleep on the couch, a book open on her chest. The TV was on mute, casting blue shadows across her face. I should have carried her to bed. Should have covered her with a blanket at least. But I just stood there, paralyzed by the strangest thought. When was the last time I touched her? Not an absent-minded pat on the shoulder, not the perfunctory goodnight kiss. Really touched her. Held her. The answer came too easily. Years. I turned off the TV and left her there. Back in our room, I stared at the ceiling until dawn, listening to the furnace kick on and off. The cracks were everywhere now, spiderwebbing through the foundation of our life together. And the terrible thing, I didn't know if they could be fixed, or if I even deserved a try. I began watching Carol more carefully after that night. Not the way a husband watches his wife, but the way a stranger might study someone they're trying to understand. The way she hummed absent-mindedly while washing dishes, the same tune she'd sung to our daughter at bedtime. The precise way she folded the newspaper after reading, creasing it sharply along the spine like she used to do with my lunch napkins back when I still came home to eat. On Thursday mornings, she visited the cemetery where her mother was buried. I only knew this because I followed her one week, parking far enough behind that she wouldn't see me. She brought white chrysanthemums, her mother's favorite, and stayed exactly 45 minutes. I timed it. Watching from the car, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd visited my own parents' graves. The house felt different now, like a museum of our former life. I started noticing all the small repairs I'd meant to make over the years. The loose banister, the dripping kitchen faucet, the cracked tile in the foyer. How had I never fixed these things? The answer came too easily, because I was never really here long enough to notice. One rainy afternoon, I found Carol's planner open on the kitchen counter. Normally, I wouldn't have looked, but one entry caught my eye. Meeting with Realtor, 3 p.m. My hands shook as I turned the page. The following week, signed papers. That night, I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, the good stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion, and studied our wedding photo on the mantel. We looked so young, so certain. What would that version of me think of the man I'd become? The thought made me drain the glass in one burning swallow. I found myself standing outside Sarah's apartment building the next day. I hadn't been invited, hadn't even called. I just sat in my car across the street, watching the lights in her 3rd-floor window. Once, she would have run to me with scraped knees or school artwork. Now I was reduced to this, a ghost haunting my own life. When I returned home, Carol was packing a box of books in the study. She didn't ask where I'd been. We'd become experts at not asking. "I thought you might want these," she said, gesturing to my old law school textbooks. Her voice was calm, as if we were discussing grocery lists. I wanted to scream, to beg, to tell her I'd finally seen the truth, that the successful career, the big house, the respectable life were all just props in a play I'd been performing for decades. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I nodded and picked up a volume, its binding cracked with age. My name was still embossed on the cover in fading gold letters, a relic from when I still believed I could have it all. As Carol taped the box shut, I noticed the wedding band on her left hand. She still wore it. That small detail hurt more than anything, because it wasn't hope keeping it there. It was just habit. The chest pain struck at 3:17 a.m., a hot, insistent pressure that radiated down my left arm like liquid fire. I lay perfectly still, counting the seconds between pulses, the way I used to count billable hours. 6 seconds, then 5, then 4. Carol slept undisturbed beside me. I studied the rise and fall of her shoulders, realizing with sudden clarity that if I died tonight, she might not notice until morning. The ER smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as a young doctor with tired eyes studied my EKG. "Stress," he concluded, peeling the electrodes from my chest. "Your body's way of telling you to slow down." He said it like it was simple, like I hadn't spent 30 years conditioning myself to do the opposite. They discharged me at dawn with a prescription for blood pressure medication and a pamphlet on mindfulness. The sunrise painted the hospital parking lot in sickly orange hues as I sat in my car, staring at the little orange bottle in my lap. The label read, "Take once daily with food." I wondered who would remind me. At home, Carol had left a note on the fridge. "Gone to Sarah's. There's soup in the freezer." Her handwriting was perfectly even, betraying no emotion. I traced the letters with my finger, remembering how she used to draw little hearts over the eyes when we were dating. The house creaked around me as I wandered from room to room, really seeing it for the first time in years. The wallpaper in the hall was peeling at the seams. The living room carpet bore 2 faint depressions where our furniture had sat before we'd updated everything. Even the air smelled different, less like home, more like a place waiting to become someone else's. In the study, I found the box of law books still sitting where Carol had left it. Beneath them, something glinted, my old pocket watch, the one my father gave me when I made partner. I wound it absently, startled when it actually ticked to life. The engraving on the back was still legible, "For the man who has everything." A bitter laugh escaped me. The watch had stopped working years ago, just like everything else I'd been given. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and my new medication, listening to the silence. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A car door slammed. Normal sounds of normal lives being lived. I thought about calling Sarah, about showing up at her door with my hospital bracelet still on my wrist. Would she care? Would it change anything? The pills rattled in their bottle as I picked it up. 30 capsules. 30 days. The question wasn't whether I'd take them. It was whether anyone would notice if I didn't. I found Carol's wedding ring in the soap dish by the kitchen sink. It lay there like a discarded button, its platinum band catching the morning light. I picked it up, feeling its unfamiliar weight. After 42 years, the grooves where it had hugged her finger were polished smooth. My own ring suddenly felt like a shackle. The house smelled of lemon cleaner and something baking, a cruel parody of domesticity. Carol moved through the kitchen with quiet efficiency, packing lunches we wouldn't eat together. She didn't glance at the ring in my palm. Didn't need to. "I'm staying with Sarah for a while," she said, wrapping sandwiches in wax paper, not looking at me. "The realtor comes Thursday." The words hung between us like a blade. I wanted to collapse, to rage. Instead, I watched as she folded the paper with surgeon's precision, creasing the edges just like she'd folded our life together. Neat, methodical, final. In the garage, I unearthed boxes labeled memories in Carol's looping script. Inside, I found artifacts of the man I'd forgotten existed, love letters from our courting days, brittle with age, ticket stubs from movies we'd seen, a pressed corsage from our daughter's wedding. At the bottom, a sealed envelope addressed to me in handwriting I hadn't seen since college. To be opened on our 50th anniversary. We'd never make it to 50. The garage light buzzed overhead as I slid down the wall, the concrete cold through my slacks. Outside, a lawnmower droned. Somewhere, a normal family was having a normal Saturday. I thought about driving to Sarah's, about falling to my knees on her doorstep. But the image dissolved before it fully formed. I couldn't remember the last time I'd held my daughter without her stiffening in my arms. That night, I stood at our bedroom window watching Carol load her car. She took only one suitcase and a cardboard box. No framed photos, no keepsakes, just practical things, as if she'd been preparing for this escape for years. When her taillights disappeared, I realized I was still clutching her wedding ring. The engraving inside caught the moonlight. Always, and a date that now felt like fiction. The house exhaled around me, the settling of pipes, the groan of floorboards. All these years I'd thought I was the foundation, the provider, the rock. Turns out I was just another weight she'd learned to carry. I poured 2 fingers of bourbon, the good stuff, and raised my glass to the empty room. The burn down my throat couldn't compete with the one behind my ribs. Somewhere between the bottom of the bottle and dawn, a terrible truth took shape. I hadn't lost my family today. I'd lost them every day for 30 years. And only now, in the wreckage, was I sober enough to see it. The house became a museum of my failures. Each room held artifacts of the life I'd neglected. Carol's favorite coffee mug, still waiting by the machine. The indentation on her side of the bed, slowly springing back into shape. I wandered through the silence like a ghost, touching the things she'd left behind as if they might whisper where I'd gone wrong. It was the piano that undid me. I hadn't touched it in years, not since Sarah took lessons as a child. The sheet music was still open to Debussy's Clair de Lune, the pages yellowed at the edges. Carol used to play it on Sunday evenings, her fingers moving with a grace I had stopped noticing. That night, I pressed a single key. The note hung in the air, lonely and perfect, and suddenly I was weeping. I called Sarah, not to beg or explain, just to hear her voice. When she answered, there was a pause, the kind filled with all the words we'd never said. "Dad?" Something in her tone, not anger, not even disappointment, just tiredness, told me she'd been waiting for this call for years. I wanted to apologize, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I asked, "Do you remember when your mother used to play this song?" A longer silence. Then softly, "She still does." And just like that, I saw it. Carol, in some sunlit living room at Sarah's, playing the same piece for a granddaughter I'd barely met. Life continuing without me. Not out of spite, but because that's what life does. The next morning, I found one last box in the garage, labeled simply, "For you." Inside were all the things Carol had kept for me over the years. My first paycheck, the poem I'd written her in college, every Father's Day card Sarah had ever made. At the very bottom, a single envelope, open when you're ready. I wasn't, not yet, but for the first time, I understood that love isn't something you earn or lose in grand gestures. It's in the small things you notice, or don't. the cups of coffee left warming on the counter, the songs played in empty rooms, the boxes packed with care, even at the end. I placed the envelope on the piano, next to the sheet music. One day I'd open it. One day I'd play that song again, but first, I had to learn how to listen. The truth about love is this: it doesn't leave all at once. It waits patiently for you to see it, until one day it doesn't wait anymore.